In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to make Ethernet cables like this one. To skip to the part where I make the Ethernet cable, you can go to the time on screen now, but before I do that, I want to go over some terminology. We commonly refer to these type of cables that you plug into your computer and then plug into a router as Ethernet cables, but that's not exactly true. Ethernet is actually a protocol that is used to transport data that can be used on many different types of cable medians. For instance, here's a Ethernet RJ45, which is this jack right here, to USB-C for use on a MacBook Pro or a Dell USB-C computer. Speaking of the jack on the end, these are called RJ45 jacks, and I have a non-attached one right here. This is a very common jack in the networking world. Next on to the actual cable itself, there are different categories of cable, which in the networking world we shorten to CAT. So for instance, this is category 5, also known as Cat 5. Actually, this is Cat 5e. There's also Cat 6a, it goes up to Cat 8. However, most internet connections cannot handle what Cat 7 and Cat 8 can supply, so most households will just be using category 5e or Cat 6. As you can see from the diagram, these different categories of cables have different speeds. Cat 6 cable is actually a little bit thicker than regular Cat 5, and when you're cabling it, there is a little plastic piece in the middle that you have to cut. That is the only physical difference between Cat 5e and Cat 6. So here's what you're going to need to make an Ethernet cable. You're going to need a cable. This is Cat 5e. You can also use Cat 6, Cat 6a. They will all work for this. You're going to need a crimper tool. This is a more fancy one with the ratcheting mechanism. However, you can get very cheap ones. If you don't feel like buying one of these, you can use a pair of needle nose pliers or an actual sewing needle to push in these little pins. However, this tool pushes in the pins, as you can see those teeth right there. Those teeth push in these pins and then puncture the wires that we'll see in a minute here. And this one ratchets, so if you only stop halfway through, it'll stop with you and it won't pull out the cable. Most of these don't ratchet. And last but not least, you're going to need a RJ45 jack. You can pick them up in large bags, such as this one. Well, here's the bag. You can pick them up in hundreds or thousands, depending on your application. You can also get very tiny containers of them if you're only doing a few cables. So the first thing you're going to need to do is strip off the outer sheathing here to get to the wires underneath. As you can see from this cross section, there are actually wires underneath this cable. I know my camera's having a hard time focusing, so you're either going to want to take a pair of scissors, a separate tool. I just realized that I actually don't have a cable stripper. However, there is a blade on this end that can close most of the way, so I'll just be using that. So to cut it, you're just going to want to apply light pressure. Obviously, if you're using a cutter that's made for it, it's going to be a lot easier. And then you're just going to pull off that outer sheathing. Be careful not to cut too far into these cables, because as you can see on the inside, there are very small cables that you could easily cut with your tool. Also in the middle is this little piece of fuzz. You can cut this off, it's neither here nor there. Next, you're going to want to unravel these little tiny cables to make them all flat. We'll get them into order later, but for now, just unravel them. This will make getting them into order a lot easier. While you're unraveling these, you're also going to want to straighten them. As you can see, I now have all these cables straight. Next thing you're going to want to do is find the correct pinout. So for Ethernet, there are two main pinouts. There is the T568A and the T568B. Both of the pinouts assume that you are holding the clip of the RJ45 away from you. Again, neither pinout is superior. The reason why there's two is because some cables, such as crossover cables, require different ends, but each standard will work for Ethernet. So now it is time for you to organize the cables into the correct pinout. It's been a while since I've done Ethernet cables, so I actually had to bring up a picture of it, and this is just exactly what you should do. You can see you have the diagram here, and then the cables here. So as the diagram says, you want to have the white with an orange stripe to go first. So I'm going to find the white with an orange stripe. And just like that, white with an orange stripe is actually over here, so I'm just going to flip this whole thing around. Just like that, and now white with an orange stripe is there. Next it says orange has to go there, so I'm going to take the orange one, which is right here, and I'm going to bring that around here. Don't worry about the lengths, we're going to cut it in a minute. So now that we have the white with an orange stripe and the orange next to each other, we now need the white with the green stripe as it says, and that is right here. So now we have these three are now in order. and so on and so forth. Just follow the diagram. And as you can see, my cables now follow the diagram. But as you can also see, these cables are now of different heights, and that's not good because when you put them into the jack, they're all going to be different heights. So you're going to want to take your tool, see this edge right here? This edge is for cutting, so you're going to want to insert them as close together and as flat as possible, and just cut ever so smallest bit off of these. So now these are perfectly straight. We can knock those off. And now you're going to want to take your RJ45 jack with these flat. Make sure that these are very, very flat. If they're not flat, they're going to fold around inside of the jack. Now simply slide it in. Now a few things to know. If you cut the sleeve too short, this moving plastic spike isn't going to be able to grip this, and then your cables are going to eventually rip out of these little pins. If you're unsure if the cables are in the right order, just look at this side and then do it in reverse. Again, when you are inserting the cables into the jack, it is very important that the jack is facing away from you. And so next, you're going to want to grab your tool. Now, these tools do have two sides. Most of them you can't insert it the wrong way, but you're going to want to look for the side that has these small pins, as you can see those. What that's going to do is that is going to push up these metal pins that are sticking out and puncture the cables, making a connection with the pin. So you're going to want to find the side with the teeth, flip it around. This crimper actually has two. I believe this is an RJ11, and then this is a RJ45. The difference is 6 pin and 8 pin. And so now you're going to want to insert the cable with the clip facing up into the correct slot. As you can see up here, there's an indent up here for the clip to go. You're going to want to slide it in like that. You're going to want to push on this, just a little bit of firm pressure so that the cables don't slide out when you come in contact. And now, you're going to want to squeeze really hard until you hear that final ratchet, or if you have one that doesn't ratchet, until you can feel the stopper. If it doesn't have a stopper, just squeeze really hard. And just like that, you have made a perfect Ethernet cable. Now, when doing the other side, make sure that the pinout is the exact same. If it's not the exact same, it's not going to work for Ethernet. If you use the other pinout, it'll actually make something called a crossover cable. Crossover cables are usually used for connecting network cards to network cards. It's not going to connect you to the internet, so don't do it. And just like that, we have created the other side of this Ethernet cable. So, that is all for this video, guys. I'm going to be making console cables and crossover cables next week. If you guys have enjoyed, just like always, make sure to subscribe. I do a lot of videos like this. I also do photography, cinematography, videography, and a ton of other stuff. If you want to see my other CCNA tutorials, those will be on screen now. And make sure to subscribe to see more CCNA tutorials like this. And as always, I'll see you next time.